is our spoiler review for Midwinterblood by Marcus Sedgwick.
I really liked this.
I thought it was good.
The more I thought about it, the more I liked it.
Yeah, I think I didn't like it more. I started to appreciate it more. It was something to read, and it was fine reading it, but it's not something I think I'd go back to.
So many levels. I like onion books.
I
like onion books, right?
I do too.
And it's just, there are multiple stories, and then there are layers to the stories. Like, it's just, oh, it's so good.
I think I just had higher expectations,
And isn't this the book that Kingdom of Little Wounds lost to?
Probably.
I think this is the book that Kingdom of Little Wounds lost to.
So,
if you have not read Kingdom of Little Wounds, stop watching this video, go read Kingdom of Little Wounds.
Then come talk to us.
Then come talk to us. So this book.
This book is a series of episodic stories. They kind of link together because it's the same characters in each one. But basically, the premise is that these two souls fell in love at the beginning of time where people were doing blood sacrifices, but this guy was the king and the harvests were doing shitty. So they're like, let's sacrifice the king. And his wife is like, but I love him. And so he's like, I will live 7 lives because I am epic. And she's like, oh, I guess I'll follow you through 7 lives. See you later. Peace out. See you in the Viking era. But, of course, these two do not end up as lovers every time. They do find each other most times. There's one time where they don't find each other. But in this, there's like the Viking era where they're brother and sister. There's an era where he's an old man and she's a little girl and they become friends. There is an era where they're mother and son. The era where they don't meet because he ends up sacrificing himself.
And there's the era where they're both women.
That one was my favorite, I think.
Yeah, that one was really good too.
I think that's everything. Then there's the modern era. They finally meet and it's their last life and they end up getting sacrificed and they're kind of like, well, shit, that was it.
I liked that they weren't always lovers.
I like that too.
Because, like, it didn't force the story to always be like that awkward kind of, like, meet, fall in love. It gave it more of a variety and showed that love isn't just romantic. Like, love can be familial, love can be, like...
Well, in a way, too, it kind of makes it romantic because it's like, it doesn't matter how and it doesn't matter when, we'll always find each other, even if circumstances aren't ideal. So I really like that.
Also, I loved the island. Like, the island was probably what fascinated me the most about this book. Because this book, I would classify it as gothic horror-esque. Because it's very, like, atmospheric. Yet, when you think of gothic horror, you always think of, like, you know, dark castles and rain and storm and, like, just darkness. And the majority of this book takes place in the sun. And that just makes it creepier in a way. Just, like... You think you're safe, but you're not.
Yeah, everything is kind of wrong, and you can't really put your finger on why. And I mean, you can, because you're like, oh my god, it's another crazy town, and they're probably following some weird religion where they're going to sacrifice the skin to the crops. And oh look, they're sacrificing him to the crop.
Well, with the first story, too, the one thing I noticed was it kind of jumped tenses a lot. Like, and normally that would be, like, the sign of bad writing. But I think it was done purposely because for the rest of the book that didn't happen. But I think it was just something just to like get under your skin and as a reader make you feel really uncomfortable because that was really grating on me and I'm just like, oh, this is so clever, I hate it. The love story between the two women like broke me a little bit.
Because it's told very cleverly too, and I think that's why I like it so much is like there are these kids and their family has moved to this place and the parents hire this woman to kind of like put them to bed and take care of them, and she starts telling them stories, and then one of those stories she's like, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there's this one story of this guy and this girl, and he was a fisherman, and they fall in love, but her father's like, no, he's below you, so, you know, you guys can't be together, don't see him, but she sneaks out every night, she goes to see him. The father finds out and is like, this can't happen anymore, so the guy ends up, you know, committing suicide. And then the kids come downstairs and like, Mommy, the lady's crying who's telling us the story. And she's like, what lady? The lady that we were gonna have watch you is right here. And the lady's like, listens to the kid's story and she's like, oh yeah, well there is a myth like that around here, except it wasn't a guy and he wasn't a fisherman. They were two aristocratic ladies.
One thing I like about that story is because she goes crazy. Like, Merle goes crazy, and she ends up contacting a witch, and this is one of the other really magical moments where she thinks that Erica is a rabbit. Because there are lots of rabbits on this island.
And
so,
rabbit is one of those themes.
Yeah, it's like a symbol. And so she goes to a witch, and she has the witch turn her into a rabbit, and I'm just like, that's so messed up.
And it does not work out because
No.
Erica was not a rabbit.
And I like how the stories kind of like reference one another, because at first they don't seem very related until I think it's about the fourth story when everything really starts to fall into place. And like the one story, you have this archaeological dig, and they find a skeleton of a man and a boy, and the one girl is constantly going, oh, it looks how like the man is like protecting the boy. And I'm like, I'm waiting for that, because I'm like, we're going to find out what this story is. We're going to find this out, and then that segues into the story we focused on in our review, because it is Vampire Month. And what is a Vampire Month without a vampire story? So the vampire story.
The vampire story is basically it takes place in Viking era, and there's this father, and he couldn't have kids with his wife, so his wife goes to stay with his brother. She gets pregnant, and the brother gets banished for some reason that's unrelated. The brother comes back like 7 years, 10 years later, something like that. The wife has had twins, and he's like, those are my kids. Those are my kids. And the father's like, no, you can't. My kids. And so they get into a big argument one night, and the father snaps the brother's neck, and they bury the brother. But lo and behold, days start passing, and they start finding, like, cut up animals with their blood drained, and then villagers start to go missing, and they're like, oh my god, okay, well, let's sleep in this one confined space, and he can't get us here. And lo and behold, people start going missing from there too, and you're like,
and so they go and they dig him up and they stake him, and like there is detail, like they stake him through the heart and they stake him through the mouth, and that like got to me, that because that was creepy.
Oh, like he's dead, whatever.
Had
they done it to him and he was alive,
that
would have been like,
that would have been messed up more. I think it's because we spent a lot of time talking about the strain, and so the moment you open a vampire's mouth now, I'm just like, don't do that. So they stake him, yet lo and behold, he keeps coming back, and like, that's messed up.
Because in any book, that should work.
That's it, we're done, we're safe, like, good.
We fixed the problem. No. So finally, because the souls in this case are Eric and Merle, the two children, Eric finally goes out and gives himself over to Vampire Daddy, and that's the bodies that they find how many hundreds of years later. So it was not sweet like the woman originally thought.
It was creepy as hell. I liked the vampire story. I think I liked the vampire story just because it was so different from all the vampire stories that I've been reading in the last few years. Like, this was the vampire is a monster, and I mean, it's not like the strain where the vampire is. It's a monster, but it's a plague monster. This is like a bona fide, this is a monster in the forest, and it's coming for you.
Like, there is nothing you can do about it. All you got is a little bit of fire and some wooden walls.
Because, I mean, the strain, it's difficult, but we know our rules. Like, there are rules. There are no rules here. Like, it doesn't matter. You have to give the thing what it wants, or you're screwed.
Yeah, so...
And I'm a sucker for that kind of thing.
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, you have to sacrifice something.
Yeah.
Anyways, so, yeah, I liked that story too, but it didn't quite fit in with the rest of the book.
No.
If you look at the level of magical realism in the rest of the story, I mean, you have souls meeting each other across time, a little weird. I guess if you believe the hair story, that happens too, but as far as I was concerned, that was a myth. Like, that was just
and I mean, you also have the magical dragon flower, which we haven't talked about. Because that was also messed up. And it made me notice another theme. Have you noticed in a lot of books where immortality is concerned, they take away the aspect of having children?
Well, it makes total sense to me.
Well, because but there's that whole other level of immortality that I always find really fascinating with characters who can have children and they stop having children because their heart breaks. Like they watch their children die. But in this, if you drink the dragon flower tea,
I kind of thought of it as like, you know, kind of natural, like nature balancing itself out, right, in the population, right? If okay, if you want to live for a very long time, then, you know, you can drink the tea, but you can't have kids because that would mess things up ecologically.
That tea was messed up. All the things that tea could do, and they discussed, like, if you can brew it in different ways, and it does different things. But, like, how, like, in the first story, how they're kind of controlling him with the tea, and they're making him really lethargic, and he's becoming really forgetful. That's, like...
Yeah, that was creepy.
That was creepy. And then, like, the whole immortality thing, or... They never really touched on it, how it can be poisonous.
Yeah, that one never got touched on. And then the woman brews a potion to turn the girl into a heron. I'm like, I bet you it was that goddamn flower again.
Because that flower is magic.
But I mean, it totally makes sense too, right?
And the other thing that I noticed, and I thought this was really, really clever, is Merle in the first story and in the last story. One of the things she repeats a lot to Eric is, I followed you. And at first it's just like, well, that's kind of friggin' creepy. Because, like, you know, he's gone swimming and she comes out, she's like, oh, I followed you. And then that story ends with him going to the church where the painting is. And, like, people come in and she's there. And she's just like, oh, I followed you. And it's kind of implied that she brought all these people. And I'm just like, ah. And then in the last story, because she's following him through time...
She's like,
I'm following you. I followed you. So it's kind of like, oh, she's aware of what's going on and you're not.
You're like, what? Yes.
I liked the ambiguous ending.
And he always says, what does he say? So it is?
So it is. So yeah, there's a lot of repetition of symbols, of like phrases. Dialogue and phrases.
But yeah, there are definitely things I like about this book.
I'd compare it kind of to Cloud Atlas. If you like Midwinter's Blood, then I would say read Cloud Atlas. I find Cloud Atlas is probably the better out of the two, but that's just because Cloud Atlas it's longer and it deals with a lot more. Like,
yeah, it seems to deal with humanity on a grander scale.
Yeah, like Midwinter's Blood is looking at two specific. Well, it's looking at love, and Cloud Atlas is looking at love and like mortality and. You know, it's multiple themes versus one, like, focused theme.
And also, their past lives really, I think, in Cloud Atlas impact things like history more than just, like, a couple little things. Like, oh, there's a skeleton, and yes.
But yeah, Midwinter's Blood was interesting. Like,
you know, I have a feeling the whole plot of this novel could have been solved if they're just like, and we're getting rid of this flower now. Fucking just push it into the sea. Like,
and I mean, at one point, a bunch of people stopped touching the flower. Like, there's an error in the timeline where people are like,
nope. Nope. And then they went back to that, and you're like,
because creepy cults always evolve around creepy flowers.
Yes. Yeah, but way back, I feel like that whole famine thing they were going through was actually just caused by the stupid dragon orchid, and they could have just mowed the whole thing down and everything would have come back.
Side note about the human sacrifice story that I found really, really interesting was that he dies, and the person who kills him is like his arch nemesis. And this king dies thinking that everything is just going to hell. Like, I can't believe he is going to take over and he's going to run this island into the ground and there's nothing I can do and blah, 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 blah. And, like, you know, he may have been, like, a bad, like, influenced hunter guy, but he grew into kingship.
It was a pretty freaking decent king. Anyway, this was our review of Midwinterblood by Marcus Sedgwick. And if you liked our review, check out our website at www.dla.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Tumblr, and yes.
And stay tuned for a further exploration of vampire fiction, because February.
Because she's way too excited about this.
I just really love Vampire Month, okay?
But you hate vampires.
I know!